kitchen. I'm trying to, let me know if anybody has trouble with seeing what I'm doing, and I'll try to angle things differently. So I started learning about fermented soda a year ago. I went to this event called the Lake Superior Traditional Ways Gathering up in northern Wisconsin. And it's a gathering where a bunch of people camp together, and there are workshops for different traditional skills. And I took a workshop with a woman named Minarda, and she taught me about fermented soda. And she also gifted me the soda starter. So I've actually never made the ginger bug myself. So I'm doing that today. It's going to be an experiment. I've done some research, and I'm hopefully showing other people how to do that as well. Because if you don't have the starter already, it's pretty easy to get it started on your own. It's different from something like kombucha, because you can make the starter really easily. You don't have to have somebody give you the starter. If I was in Milwaukee, I would give everybody a little bit of soda starter to make it a quicker process, but I cannot. So that's why I'm showing how to make the ginger bug too. So I'm gonna start with that. I guess before I start making the ginger bug, I'll talk a little bit about how the fermented soda works. So the ginger bug is just ginger and sugar, and there's bacteria and natural yeast on the surface of the ginger that feeds on sugar, and that produces the carbon dioxide. That's the carbonation in the drinks. So really all that goes into the fermented soda drinks are water, sugar, the starter or ginger bug. So you can either use the ginger bug that you just made, or you can use old soda and kind of recycle it, and it'll still be active. And then you can use different fruits, herbs, and I'll give a lot of options for that you can add for flavoring, and to add different medicinal properties too. And one really cool thing about the soda is that it's healthier than traditional soda because it has less sugar. You are adding sugar when you make it, but that gets mostly consumed by the ginger bug, but you still get some sweetness, which is really nice. And it also can have the benefits of whatever you're adding for flavoring. And one of those things that I really like is elderberry, because it has a really nice sweet flavor, but it also has medicinal properties like immune support. And the ginger itself can help with digestion and immune support, and headaches and all kinds of other things. So there are a lot of things in there that you don't really get when you buy soda at the store. So it can be a nice alternative if you're looking for a healthier drink and you really like soda, or you don't, and you can just make whatever flavors you like. So I'm gonna start making the ginger bug, and like I said, I've not done this before, so it'll be an experiment. So I've got fresh ginger, and this is organic ginger. So what I've read is that if it's organic, you don't need to peel it. And a lot of the bacteria is lactobacillus, and it's on the surface of the ginger. So you don't want to lose a lot of that. So I'm just going to rinse it off. And then so what you'll need for the ginger bug, you're going to need a jar to put everything in. And you'll need fresh ginger, and you'll also need sugar. And I'm just using cane sugar. You can use all kinds of different sugar. You could use honey. So there are a lot of options for that. Sorry, my face can't be in it at the same time as what I'm cooking. Okay, so what you start with is 2 tablespoons of ginger, and then you end up feeding the ginger bug for 5 to 8 days. But you're gonna just start with 2 tablespoons of diced ginger. I've also read that you can do shredded ginger, but one nice thing about dicing it is that it's easier to strain out later. So I'm just gonna start cutting up some of the ginger. And if people have questions while I'm doing this, feel free to either put them in the chat and Michael can read them, or just shout it out.
So Caleb, as you're cutting, this is Michael. I have heard that ginger oftentimes has a salmonella on it. Do you know if that's true or not? Or if rinsing will probably not kill it, but...
Well, so what I've heard is that with the organic ginger, you don't need to worry as much, and that rinsing it should be sufficient. And I guess you can peel it if that's something you're more concerned about. So it's a good question, and I don't have a great answer. So the making the ginger bug is the most effort that you have to put in, I would say, to making the soda, because otherwise you're just gonna let the soda sit. So the ginger bug is what you'll have to feed every day, but after that, once you've got it started, you won't have to feed it basically at all, as long as you're making soda occasionally with the starter.
So Caleb, I am going to do the job of reading the chat. So Jenny says, I see that soda sits at room temperature for 2 days, but the bug 5 to 8 days. Refrigerate bug or leave on the counter, sealed jar, open jar?
They should both be sealed. So both the soda and the ginger bug should be sealed while they're sitting out. And both can be sitting out at room temperature. And the time that it takes for things to ferment will depend on how hot it is. So I started some soda that I'll be straining a little bit later. I can show you. And it's been super hot here. It was 80 degrees yesterday. So this stuff fermented really fast. So it might take less than 2 days if it's really hot out, or it might take longer if it's kind of cold. So that's also what the variation in time is for the ginger bug. It might be that it's based on the temperature, but you can kind of look out for the bubbles, and I'll talk about that too. But that's how you know that when you see the carbonation and the bubbles starting to happen with the ginger bug, that's how you know that it's active. So I just added 2 tablespoons of the diced ginger here. I am going to let my roommate in really quick. Sorry.
So this is when we talk amongst ourselves. Can somebody share what? Oh, that was really quick. Okay, fine. Don't share.
It was just a door in the kitchen. Sorry about that. And then I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I have the ginger in this jar. And then I'm gonna add 2 cups of water. I'm not gonna be like super precise about it, but I can see the 2 cup line on the quart jar, and just add a little bit more than that since there's already stuff in there. So I'm just gonna fill that up. So I'm gonna seal this, and then I'm going to mix it a little bit. So I'm just gonna shake it to mix it to get the sugar dissolved in the water.
So Caleb, as you're shaking, which is really, invigorating, you used brown sugar, right?
I used cane sugar.
You used cane sugar, okay.
It was golden brown.
So Nicole's asking, can you talk about sweeteners? Does it have to be a certain kind of sugar? You mentioned a couple things before, I think.
Yeah, I've used different kinds of sugar and different kinds of sweetener. I started out using honey, and that worked really well. And then I kind of transitioned to cane sugar because that's just what we had around. And that has seemed to work fine too. And since this, I've been using cane sugar and it's golden brown lately since I got to Portland. And I found that I can use a little bit less because when you make the soda, you usually use a fourth of a cup. But I've been using 3 tablespoons and it's sweet. That also depends on how long you let it sit. So if you start your soda and try it after 2 days and it's still really sweet, you can just let it sit longer, and more of the sugar will get consumed and it'll be a little bit less sweet. Um, so that's mixed up. And then the next thing you want to do is just let that sit at room temperature for a day. And then you feed the ginger bug, and you add 1 tablespoon of ginger and 1 tablespoon of sugar every day. And then you seal it and just let it sit. And then after about 5 days, you'll start to see bubbles. And that's the carbon dioxide being released. And that's when you know that it's active. And after the 5 days or so, you can start using it to make soda. And as I'm talking, this other soda has started making noise because the pressure popped the lid out. So I'm gonna strain that one very soon, but I'm just gonna leave it for another few minutes. So that's the ginger bug. And this is also an experiment for me to see how it goes, and see what that process is like over the next few days. So if anybody has continuing questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those, because it's also new to me. So does anybody have any questions about that process before I start making the soda? If not, you can just type them in the chat and I can talk about them later.
I think just real quick, so like when you feed it each day, this is probably obvious, but just to be sure, do you make sure to agitate, and does that make a difference as far as like how much agitation?
You want to mix it, and I think you want the sugar to dissolve in the water, and that's the main thing. But I've also, Minarda, when she told me how to make the soda, she said that she doesn't shake the soda at all once she starts it, and that's obviously, that's not the ginger bug, that's the soda itself.
The soda process, okay.
Yeah, so it might be a bit different, but people have different strategies, and I found that I do like to mix it up a little bit, and I think that might even cause it to ferment faster. But some people will just kind of let it sit and let it do its own thing, and you'll see if you like have sugar on the bottom over the next day or so, it'll get mixed in and consumed. So that's kind of up to you. I think maybe starting the ginger bug, mixing it is a good idea because you don't have the active culture already consuming the sugar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to starting some soda, and I'm gonna use soda that I've already made as the starter, instead of the ginger bug, but you can use either the same amount of the ginger bug or soda that you've already made. So I'm gonna grab that. So I only have a little bit left, but it's enough. It's perfect. So the first one I'm gonna make, because it's my favorite, is fennel soda. I have a really big fennel. So I'm gonna wash this first, and then I'll start chopping it up. So fennel is one of my favorite things to add for flavoring for soda, but you can add a lot of different things. And I find it really fun to just experiment with that. And a little later, after I process the other soda, I have some flavors that I haven't tried before that I'm gonna make. And we'll see how those turn out too. And sometimes it goes well, and other times it's not. So I had some ideas also for some of my favorite flavors to make. So fennel, when I make the fennel soda, it ends up with kind of a cola flavor, which I really like, but it's more subtle than like a Coca-Cola or something. And then I also really like to use sumac because it's got this really nice lemony flavor. And I've made quite a bit of soda with sumac. I lately have been making soda with Oregon grape, which is something that I have access to out here, that is not in Wisconsin, unfortunately. But it has a really nice tart flavor. They're not sweet because it's actually a kind of holly and not a traditional grape that we would imagine. So that's kind of the flavor that I like to make the soda with. So berries that have a similar like tart flavor can be really nice. I've also used aronia berries and rose hips. And rose hips have a lot of vitamin C, so that can be a benefit of using those. I guess I'll show what I'm doing. I'm just starting to cut up the fennel. You can also use sweeter berries if that's something you like. Like I've made soda with blueberries and blackberries, but it's not really my favorite thing because it gets to be have kind of a syrup flavor, and it's not as refreshing, I guess. But if you like things that are a little bit sweeter, you can definitely do that. You could also choose to add a little bit less sugar, and that might make it a little bit less sweet. Oh, and then Matthew, you might also like this one because lately I've been making some lavender soda because I found a lot of lavender in my yard recently. And I don't love the flavor of lavender in a drink because it makes me think of like soap or something like that. But if you like the flavor of lavender, it can be really nice in soda. I've been using lavender and red clover to make kind of a sweet and lavender flavored soda. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a quart jar, and I'm just gonna add. I use like all of the fennel, not all of this, but all the parts of it. And I don't have like a very specific measurement for how much I add, but I've kind of found like it depends on what you're using for flavor, how much you need. But I like to add, I guess it really depends on, so this is about a cup and a half if I kind of compress it of the fennel. And to me, that's enough for the flavor, but you can definitely add more. And you can experiment with how much of each thing that you need. I'll probably have different amounts of the other things that I'm using. So after the fennel, the next thing to add is 1/4 cup of the soda starter. So in this case, I'm using the soda that I made recently, and not the ginger bug, but you would also use 1/4 cup of the ginger bug if that's where you were starting. I haven't been being super precise with this either lately, and it's been working out fine. But for the sake of this video, I'm measuring things. And then you add the sugar, and I've been using 3 tablespoons of the type of sugar that I have. If you're using honey, or if you like things to be sweeter, 1/4 cup is generally the measurement that you would start with.
Quick question. So say you had made like blueberry soda last time. Would you still use the blueberry soda to make a different flavor?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. I found that there isn't a lot of residual flavor of like the past soda, especially because you're using so little of it,
Hmm.
a fourth of a cup. And then usually when you're adding quite a bit of whatever you're using for flavor, it tends to overpower
Okay, great.
whatever you were using before.
All right, thanks.
So there's that. And then, so it has the starter, it has the sugar. And then I just fill this up with water all the way. This is a quart jar. So if you were using a smaller jar, you would probably adjust the measurements. I've made this mistake of using a smaller jar and not adjusting the measurements because I forgot to, and then it got super fermented really fast because there was too much sugar. So I'm gonna fill this jar up with water. So then I'll seal this jar. And I do like to, I don't really shake it very hard, but I like to mix it up to get the sugar kind of mixed into the water. And then I'm just gonna let this sit out and it'll sit out for 2 days. And it might depend on if it gets really hot tomorrow, but it might be done a little bit early and you can kind of tell because if it gets really fermented, it'll pop the lid, which is what happened to my other one. And that's a good sign that it's done or getting close to being done. And then after that, I'm gonna show the process of finishing the soda. But what you'll do after the 2 days is you'll strain out whatever you use for flavoring, and then you'll seal it. And depending on if it's, you can taste it and see if it's too sweet or if you're happy with the flavor. And if it's still sweet, I would seal it and let it sit out again for another half day because that'll allow it to continue fermenting a little bit. It'll also get more carbonated if you release some of the pressure when you were straining it. But if like lately it's been fermenting really quickly in the summertime, sometimes it's just done. And then you would put it in a refrigerator and that'll slow down the fermentation process. So while it's sitting in your fridge, it'll still continue to ferment, but it will just be like at a much slower rate, much less noticeable.
So Caleb, before you move on, Hal's wondering if you don't have access to a specific fruit or veggie you want to use, do extracts work well for flavoring? Like if you want to try vanilla but don't have vanilla beans, would vanilla extract be okay?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't actually used extracts for making my own soda, but I was just looking at a bunch of different recipes to see what other people are doing. And some people like to make cream soda with the same method using the ginger bug, and they use vanilla extract. So that's a really good option to try. Um, I think it's great to just experiment with whatever you do have access to. Some people will use sweetened teas because that kind of has the same effect of it has the sugar and it has the flavor, and then you'll get the carbonation. And that's kind of similar to kombucha. So if you're used to making kombucha that way, you can use a similar method just with a different method of fermentation. Yeah.
And then I just had a quick question as well. So kind of like similar, I've been doing my own kombucha for the first time, and I've like brewed it like four or five times. And the reading I've done on it, like, I mean, I guess depending on which source I'm reading, it does seem like they try to be pretty specific about like ideally use this type of water or like avoid this this additive of any kind. Is there, do you know if it's if there's any like do not put this in your ginger bug soda experimentation, like is there any like no-go list, or is there like a specification about make sure you have this kind of water, especially like in Milwaukee, like the water quality can vary, and like I don't currently have a filtration system, so I'm just, you know, fingers crossed with my tap. But yeah, just any kind of like feedback with that.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and nothing's coming to mind right away that's a total no-go. I'd say definitely be careful about washing all the fruits or veggies that you're putting in your soda, especially if they're not organic or if you just harvested them from outside. Um, in terms of water, I definitely think filtered water is better, but I've been using tap water pretty consistently to make soda and have not had an issue with it with the fermentation. And I know that that can, there can still be traces of minerals and lead and things like that. So definitely filtered water is the ideal. But if you're drinking your tap water, I think it's worth a try. And you're not adding something you're not already drinking. So then I wanted to mention one other thing is that I like to put, this is a very chaotic scene over here. I've got a lot of jars, but I put the soda while it's while it's sitting out on a plate, because sometimes if the lid pops, it'll start to release air, and some of the soda will drip down and it can stain your surface. So that's why I'll store them on plates while they're sitting out. I'll put the ginger bug there too. And another thing that I learned from Menardo when I took their original class is not to use the jars that have the flip tops, the ones that they're like bottle shaped usually, and you has like a little metal. Do people know what I'm talking about? I don't know how to describe it. But those don't allow for the seal to break if there's too much pressure. Oh yeah, there's one right there.
Dana is showing us what we're talking about.
Right. Awesome. So I've been told not to use those, even though I've seen some recipes that recommend them, just because if the pressure gets to be too much, it can't break the seal, so the glass can just shatter. So that's not ideal. I would much rather have the lid be unusable than the glass itself. I've also found that a lot of my lids do pop up when I'm making soda, and I reuse them and don't have any issue with it. And they still ferment using the same lids. So I know for canning, sometimes you can't reuse the lids, but that hasn't seemed to be an issue for me. So the next thing I'm gonna do is show the end of the process of making soda. So this is Oregon grape soda that I started 2 days ago. And I'm gonna strain it, and then I'm gonna refrigerate it because I can tell it's already very fermented, and it's ready to be done. And then after that, if I have more time, I'll show some other options. I've collected some different plants today to make soda with. So I'll just start a bunch of soda if people are still interested and want to see that process. I also have a bunch of fennel, so I'm going to make more fennel soda after this, but I wanted to kind of show a variety of things. So for straining the soda, the process that I like to use, is I like to use a big mixing bowl and a strainer, so I don't have to use a bunch of different jars. It's just been the easiest way for me. So what I'll do, I'm gonna open this, and it's probably gonna be pretty loud, which is kind of exciting. Or maybe not. Here we go. And then you can see how carbonated it is right now. I don't want to spill it, but it's very bubbly. And you can hear it too a little bit. So I'm just gonna strain it into this mixing bowl. And then I have all of the Oregon grapes caught in here. And I'm just gonna put it back into the same jar. That's what I usually do, so I don't have to use a lot, but I'm just gonna rinse it out first because sometimes there's residue or different, there's some like berry remnants left in there. think somebody asked something in the chat. Do I eat the grapes? Yes, you can definitely eat the stuff that you make soda with, but I would not eat the Oregon grapes because they're very bitter on their own. They're very tart and they don't taste very good when they're not in soda. But if you use blueberries or something like that, you can definitely eat them, and they'll be kind of fizzy and fun. So then you have an exciting snack after you make the soda too. So I'm gonna really carefully pour the soda, which is in this bowl, back into the jar, but I'm gonna do it over the sink, so I'm spill it everywhere.
So Caleb, you don't want to live dangerously over your computer?
Not today. So this is what the soda looks like when it's strained, and you can tell it really takes on the color of whatever you put in there. And you can kind of see, I guess it hasn't started changing color much yet, but this one will probably end up being a very green color. I'll just seal this again. And then because this one's been sitting out for quite a long time in hot weather, I'm just gonna refrigerate it. First, I'm actually gonna use some of it for starter because I don't have a lot right now. But if you try it and it doesn't, if it still tastes pretty sweet, you can just leave it out for another half day and it'll continue to ferment. So does anybody have questions about this part?
Yeah, Caleb, this is Lori. The inquiring minds want to know, how many jars do you have on your counter at any given time?
It depends how much soda I'm making. Somebody dropped off a bunch of free jars for me because I was asking around and needed them for this in particular. So I think I have like 8 or 10 jars right now. I don't leave them all out on the counter most of the time, but when I'm making soda, I'll have like 3 or 4 that are fermenting at a given time. And today probably a lot because I'm gonna make several more batches. I collected a lot of possibilities here. And one I'm excited about is I picked some rosemary that I found in our backyard actually, and some wild strawberries. And I've made soda with the wild strawberries before, and they don't have a lot of flavor, so that's why I thought I would mix them with something else. So maybe I'll do that because it's something I haven't tried before. And then I also got some Douglas fir tips. You can't really see very well, but they have a really nice, like, fresh flavor when you make soda with them. So that's a great option. And then I also picked up some more Oregon grapes, so I can make some more of that. And that'll be really tasty. So when I'm starting soda, just like I did with the fennel, I'm just gonna wash everything. I'm gonna use my strainer again.
I have a question. I'm very process oriented, so just when it comes to washing, especially for like forage stuff, is besides like a rinse, would you recommend like a deeper clean or like I know sometimes people maybe do like a vinegar bath or something. I'm just curious.
I usually don't. I usually just rinse things. And especially if I know that the area that they came from is not sprayed with pesticides and is not frequented by dogs, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But it also depends on your area. And if you're more comfortable washing things a little bit more thoroughly, it can be a good idea. I don't tend to do it. It's totally up to you, but that's a really good question.
Yeah, I'm usually like a not very thorough person, so I'm just like, if you tell me I have to be thorough, I'll do it. But will I? Normally, probably not. Like,
That's
I'll rinse it, but not.
Rinsing is always good. I would always recommend rinsing things. So I've got the wild strawberries in here. And they, like I said, they don't have a ton of flavor. They're very small and they're just kind of watery. But I do think if I mix them with another flavor, they'll be kind of sweet. So I just rinsed those, and I'm gonna start a new jar. And I'm gonna take off all of the green parts of the strawberry because that might be more bitter and the flavor won't be very good. And then something I like to do with berries that I can't really do with something like fennel is I crush them a little bit when I put them in the soda, and I think that just kind of releases the flavor. And it also berries have natural sugars that will help with the fermentation. So I didn't collect a ton of these. I'm just gonna add all of them that I have. Also, because they don't have a super strong flavor, I think adding more of them can be helpful. That's something to keep in mind because I don't have like a specific measurement. It can be good to be mindful of how strong the flavor is of what you're adding. So I didn't collect a lot of rosemary because it has a really strong flavor. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of that, and I think it'll mix really well with the strawberries. I'm gonna rinse this first. I think I'll just add all the rosemary that I have. So this will be a really fun, colorful jar. And then I'm gonna add the starter, so 1/4 of a cup of the soda. I'm still just gonna add the 3 tablespoons of sugar because that's what I've been doing lately. And then I'll just fill this up the rest of the way with water. So there's that one filled up. I'll seal that. And one thing that can be really helpful if you're starting a lot of soda at different times too is to label them with the date, so you know 2 days from then that they'll be ready. Sometimes I make more specific notes about like the time of day that I started them, if I want to make sure that I'm actually getting 2 days. But I'm not super precise about it usually, and they tend to, work out okay, and you can kind of open them and see how fermented it is, how much pressure or carbonation there is, and leave it sitting a little longer, or put it away and put it in the refrigerator if it's done. So you can kind of see, I've already started to mix it, but if I don't mix it entirely, some of the sugar just sits at the bottom, and that can be okay. If you let it sit like that, it'll just eventually disappear as it gets used up by the ginger bug. I'm just gonna set that one out. So then, does anybody have more questions right now? Because I'll go ahead and start some more soda. So the next one that I'm gonna make, I think I'm gonna make the Douglas fir tips. And this is a flavor that Minarda suggested when I first learned to do this too. So, and it's one that I really like. I collected quite a bit, and I'm just going to rinse these off. And one tip she had was that when you are harvesting the Douglas fir tips, to use the younger parts of the leaf, and they're lighter and they're on the very end, and you can kind of see where the color changes. And so they're a little bit younger and can be a little bit tastier, I think. So rinse those off. And I like to break them up a little bit, but they don't need to be totally ripped apart.
So if you have smaller containers, how would you adjust the amount, I guess like in regards to both making the bug, and I know like that's a new process for you, but like in regards to making the bug, and then like if you're making the soda, what's like a rough adjustment for those measurements?
Yeah, I would say it definitely depends on how much water you're going to be adding to your jar. So it depends on the size of that container.
Okay.
So if you have something this doesn't have the measurements on it,
So
but
like a 16-ounce jar would
yeah.
be.
So if you have a 16-ounce jar, I would just cut your measurements in half. And this is for the ginger bug. And I'm not totally sure how that would work with the ginger bug. I would say give it a shot with cutting the measurements in half. It doesn't hurt to try. Definitely with a soda, it'll work out. You'll just have a smaller amount in the end. But if it was half as big as a quart, you would end up using
Or I guess like a 12-ounce.
cup of starter and sugar.
Okay.
I'm curious if other people watching this have ideas for different flavors that you might want to try for soda.
I like a lot of herbaceous flavors, so I was like already thinking of like, okay, what has, like you're already using rosemary, which is really great, but I was thinking like basil. I definitely use like mint when just for like infusing my water.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be really cool to like experiment with different plants within the spearmint family, because I'm really partial to catmint. I think that's like a really beautiful flavor, or like beautiful smell, but I don't know how much that flavor would actually translate, but I'm thinking a lot of herbs right now.
Yeah, I think mint would be really tasty, especially if you mix it with something a little bit sweeter too, or you could just do entirely mint, and it'll have a little bit of sweetness from the sugar. I just love mixing the flavors too. That can be kind of fun to experiment with.
I haven't done it, but I eat these melatonin gummies that are blackberry and mint, and it is so good. I have to like stop myself from eating them. So that could be a good combo.
That sounds delicious. I made some blackberry soda recently, and it was very sweet. And that's why it's not one of my favorite things to make soda with berries that are already really sweet. But I think with mint too, that would be really, really good.
Hal had a really great flavor suggestion in the chat that I think would be cool. That he was saying the sugar snap peas would be fun to experiment with because they're so sweet.
Oh, interesting. I've never thought about using peas. That would be a really interesting. Hal, let me know if you try that. I would love to hear how that goes.
Beets might be fun or wild. I don't know, but
Mm.
maybe not fun. It could just be like drinking dirt, but I'm not like opposed to that.
I made some with dandelions recently that ended up being just kind of earthy. It didn't have a super strong flavor, but I think things like that that have just kind of an earthy flavor can be really good too. And if anybody ends up trying some flavors, I would love to hear about how
Did
that.
you use the heads and the leaves for the
No,
dandelion?
I just used the flowers, the heads.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So I added the starter to this one. This is the Douglas fir tips, and then I'm going to add the sugar too. And this one, because I haven't mixed it yet, you can see the sugar sitting down there. And you can choose if you want to mix it up a little bit or if you just want to leave it. And it's kind of cool to watch the process of the sugar being consumed. And I think I saw somebody said something about lime. I think that would be really good. I haven't tried. Oh no, I have made some lime soda, and that was really good. I've used some lemon before, and it can be really strong. I think I might have left that out too long in the heat, so that's where it can kind of get. If it gets over fermented, it's not very sweet anymore. So there's a balance too of how long you leave it out.
When you do have batches that maybe like over ferment just because you weren't expecting like the weather to be as warm or something, have you experimented with like trying to course correct? Obviously like not there's like the batches the way it is, but you know, do you add like a syrup or like half and half with maybe another soda or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say I haven't done a ton of experimenting with that. Usually what I do is I'll just use that for starter because if the flavor isn't super nice to drink, it can still be really great for starting other soda and it doesn't have really any residual flavor in the next soda. But I would be really interested to see what would happen with adding something sweeter and maybe like different flavors. But I would definitely stop leaving that out at room temperature and refrigerate it right away if you're going to try experimenting and adding some other things so it'll really slow down the fermentation process. And then Nicole, who's my mom, if people don't know, said that I should talk about our lilac experiment. So we tried to make some lilac soda recently, and I thought that would be really a really nice flavor because of how lilacs smell. But it ended up having like a very, I don't know, how would you describe the flavor? Yucky. It didn't turn out the way we intended. That's something that happens when you're trying different flavors. And that can be from things over fermenting, or it can just be that whatever you use, maybe it smells really good, but it doesn't have a great flavor when you drink it. So that's something I've learned a lot when experimenting with different flavors. So the last soda that I have supplies to make right now is the Oregon grape, which is the same one that I started with. And that one takes a little bit of time just because I have to, when I rinse it, I remove all of the berries that aren't ripe yet and all of the little stems. So that can be a little monotonous of a process. So if people have other questions while I'm doing this, It's a great one.
Have you made it with like commercial grapes?
I don't think I have. I think if you like the flavor of grape soda, and it would be pretty different. But if you like the grape flavor, that would be something definitely worth trying. I think for me, because I don't like the super sweet sodas when I make fermented soda, I probably wouldn't like that flavor as much. But it can definitely be.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, hey, you guys. This is so artisan and cool. Would you have done this in Milwaukee, or is this a Portland thing?
I was doing this in Milwaukee. I've been doing it for about a year, since last summer.
Nice.
Did a lot of it.
I love it. Well, I'm out on a 15,000 step walk, but I'm a former chef, and so I was just kind of wondering about some savory, maybe some Thai flavors like lemongrass or lavender, you know, different kind of things from the Asian culture. Have you tried that at all?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about lavender earlier, and I've made some soda with it, definitely, and my friends really like it. I will say, like, it's a good soda, but I don't personally like the flavor to drink it, so I don't make it that often.
Yeah. Well, I eat so much Thai food, I was thinking like galanga or ginger root, you know, lemongrass, all the different edible flowers. It's so cool, Caleb. I love it.
Yeah, I haven't tried the other ones that you've mentioned, so those sound delicious, and definitely if you try them, let me know, because I think that'd be a really great experiment. So now here are the grapes, and I got mostly ripe ones this time. Luckily, they've gotten riper since I got here, so I'm just gonna rinse these and try to remove some of the other stems, and then I'll start another batch with these. So usually I would break these up a little bit more, but I don't, it's gonna get pretty messy. And it also ends up working out all right if I don't. So I'm just gonna add those while removing the stems. And I've got a bug in there. Sometimes you have to be really careful when you are harvesting things that you don't have bugs. I made some sumac soda a while ago, and I didn't rinse those. I just shook them off to kind of keep the flavor, and ended up with a couple of bugs in the soda. So I did not feel great about drinking that one. So that's something to be mindful of if you're using sumac, especially, or anything else that you're harvesting.
That reminds me, the mention of sumac, which I love. I worked at a Persian restaurant, and that's where I first encountered that and fell in love with that. And I was gonna ask, do you only use the whole berries, or have you used it as like the powder?
I've only ever used the whole berries that I've harvested. I've never used the powder, but I think, you know, I think you can also use dried herbs if you have access to those instead. So that would be a really interesting flavor too. I think a really great experiment. And I would also be curious with that to see how strong it is, the powder compared to the flowers.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful color too. So I was excited to hear that that's one you've done before.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite flavors too. So if you have, and I looked up when it's ready to be harvested today, because I was curious if there was any around, but it's not ready until a little bit later in the summer. And that's when I harvested it a lot last summer. So not quite yet, but it looks like July and August are really great times to look for that if you have access to it. So for this one, because I ran out of my old starter, so I'm gonna just use the Oregon grape that I started a couple days ago. And that's good to go as a starter. Just any soda that you've already finished fermenting, you can continue using, which is really nice. So you don't have to like continually make a ginger bug. You don't have to continue feeding it or anything.
I would say another flavor suggestion to maybe try, because I recently just made some iced tea, or like, yeah, basically like iced tea with this, but like hibiscus blossoms. I got that through the Spice House in Milwaukee, and yeah, I that would be interesting to try in this form to see how it behaves.
That sounds great too. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of flavor ideas, and I'm gonna have to go through the chat later and pull them out for new ideas to try. I just added the starter and the sugar to this one, and I'm going to fill it up again. And I don't have a ton of berries in here, but that's about the amount that I had in the last one. And when I've used Oregon grapes before, the flavor has tended to be really strong. So that's one that I don't feel like I need a ton of when I'm making this. So there's that one. And I told my roommates in 2 days I'm going to have a whole lot of soda for us to drink, so they're very excited. And it's kind of fun to see. They really change color pretty fast. Right now, this one's still pretty light colored because it's just the starter and the water, but within a day, it'll get really dark, which is kind of fun to see. So I'm gonna set that one out, and now try to show you. Have all of my sodas sitting out. There. So those are all of the flavors that I prepared to make today. I'm gonna make some more fennel soda because I have so much fennel, and it looks like we have more time, but I would like to focus on people's questions if you have any others, because I'll make a lot of soda later too.
I'm sorry I'm so noisy. Do you use alternative sweeteners like honey or maple syrup or rice bran syrup or anything? Sugar can be so hard on the body.
Yeah, I have used honey a lot. When I learned to make this, I was told not to use maple syrup, and I'm not entirely sure why. It might be because it already has kind of a strong flavor. If you want to try making it with maple syrup, I think it would still serve the purpose of allowing the ginger bug to feed on the sugar. So that's definitely worth a try. But honey doesn't have a strong flavor that transfers to the soda. So I really like that. Other than that, I've only personally used cane sugar. I haven't experimented with other kinds of sugar. But I would definitely say honey is a good option if you'd rather not use sugar.
I know coconut sugar is becoming a little easier to find too, and I've been using that both when I make my kombucha and when I make my kefir water too, just because it's like what I have on hand at the moment. So it's like a kind of lighter flavored as well.
Yeah, and that's a great idea too. And hearing that if you use it for kombucha and that's worked well, then I assume it would work well for soda too, because that's the sugar that it needs.
I'm sure there's kombucha people who would not appreciate that I use it, but I'm like, well, my Scopie's happy, and I guess that's all that matters.
As long as your Scobie's happy, and it's all a big experiment too.
Yeah.
And
if I kill the Scobie, I don't feel that bad. I mean, maybe I should feel worse, but it's like, well, science.
And then you'll know not to use it. So, but it sounds like it's a good option if it's working so far. So that can be another alternative.
So Caleb, this is Michael. In a couple of days, will you post some pictures on the Facebook page and like show everybody what your results look like?
Yeah, I definitely can. I can also post a picture of all the sodas together because I think it looks really cool to see all the different plants and stuff just floating, and especially as they change color. But they'll get really bubbly and then they'll be very colorful. So I can definitely share how those go.
Caleb, I'm aware of our time too. Like, we've got about 5 minutes left. Do you have, oh, there's a dog. Oh, sorry.
Say hi.
Hi, dog.
It's Bagel the Beagle.
There's a beagle in our house too, which she's fortunately asleep right now, so that's good for this end.
He woke up because dinner is about 2.5 hours, and that's when he starts begging.
Sweet. That's really sweet. Did you have a wrap-up thought or two or three?
I mean, I'm happy to answer questions if people have a couple more before we're finished, but I think I've covered most of what I wanted to. And it's all experimenting and seeing what you end up liking. Yeah. We're missing Trey.
Sorry, not you, the dog.
So yeah, I'm really excited to see what other people try out. One thing I'll also say is if it's really hot, I might put these all in the basement in a cooler spot. So that's another thing you can do aside from refrigerating things, because that will slow down the fermentation too much, is on a hot day, put them in a basement or another room if you have that option.
Really cool.
Do you have any kind of like, do you show this kind of stuff on like your Instagram, or do you have like plugs for social media stuff that we should follow? Besides all of Forge's platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I don't post a lot about soda making on my personal social media. I do occasionally, or Forge for that matter, but it sounds like I should start doing that. So maybe, Michael, do you want to put in the social media links for Forge?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe a little
Whenever. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, everybody.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you.